I'm still continuing on trying to educate women about, well, fantasy, living in fantasy and not accepting what life's all about. In fact, acting like life is the enemy if there's something in there that you don't want. My mom, continue on talking about my mom, who was a prime example of this. You know, she was the one who bought classics for me to read and filled up the library with all kinds of wonderful books, but then she didn't read all. She started getting very addicted to romance novels. You know, and she was always talking about, oh, she loved this handsome, debonair guys, and she just sort of lived in this kind of fantasy. And so, as I said before, I decided when I was 5 years old, from things that my father had taken me and my sister to the male neighbors who later molested me. But I had already decided from the behavior of my father and this man that they were having a homosexual affair, and I was only 5 years old. But just the things they did and said, sexual things they said in front of me, and how my dad was acting. I was a very close observer of my dad. He was my hero. He was my protector from my mother when she got carried away with her frustration with him, who was a drinker, who spent every weekend virtually away from home, giving her the slip and partying with men all up and down the country. And so I could put this together at 5 years old. But my mother, who had read all these books, it just never came into her mind. I never heard her ever think of that. And so I couldn't really tell her anything, because I was afraid that if I told her and she or tried to put this thought into her head, that she would get into a terrible fight with my dad and somebody would get murdered. I mean, you just don't tell husbands and wives stuff that, even if they're your mother and dad, that you think could cause a really bad problem. So, as I said, I just didn't find a time to tell. I knew my sisters wouldn't be happy with me telling them this, because I continued on working with my dad, observing him. My younger sister had asthma, so she couldn't continue on doing the outside work. And I just kept seeing evidence that I thought of what my dad's nature really was. And I thought he'd probably gotten this from the cowboy work they did, camping out all the time. Oh, yes.
Is there a point on this one?
Oh, well, yes, there is. Anyway, when I went to tell,
it's like we're dredging up stuff from
my
80 years
mother,
ago. Let's get to the point here.
The thing what happened is my mother finally divorced my dad, married another alcoholic.
After how many years?
After 35 years.
Well, enough.
And then
enough,
she had divorced the second one because he was an alcoholic, and he was a womanizer. He was. And then she found another that she just thought was a wonderful treasure. He didn't drink. He could sing romantic songs. He was 20 years younger. And she was going to marry him. Well, us girls, especially me, had detected that he was a gay. And mother, and in fact, we even confronted him, and he said, oh, yes, he was. But he was bisexual. But don't tell our mother. It would just kill her. She couldn't take it. And we were going like, oh.
I thought she paid like 20 grand.
Well, yeah. And my mother at that time.
The LA Philharmonic, so he could make a
yes.
That not only was so bad.
How bad was it?
Oh, well, anyway, he was busy. Sort of tapping her bank account, so he didn't want us to tell her, and he told us.
Your mother quiet.
He said,
sang, right?
I'm going to marry your mother and take care of her.
Over the rainbow.
Yes. Shut up. So he was going to.
I get no respect. I get no
No,
respect.
you don't. So anyway, he was going to marry her. So we were going like, I'm going to marry her. So I did, Mother, if you marry him, all he's going to do is strip you of your assets, and then you'll be old and you'll have no money. And she had considerable money at the time, up in the, well past 100,000s, 300,000s I think she came home from Hawaii with. And when she met him, when she already had him in tow, and he knew she had this money, and he was always trying to get on her bank account. So we were trying to say, Mother, why? I said, Mother, why do you want to marry a gay guy? Oh, well, I haven't seen that. Well, anyway, at the time that I read her history, and this seemed to unearth a memory of my father, catching my father in a compromising position with a man in a hotel room. And he had told her it was a doctor that he had called to examine him. And she had apparently believed this all those years or never gave it another thought. And all of a sudden it came to mind. She wrote it down, so I would go over, I read this, and I said, oh, finally I can tell Mother about Daddy. So I told her on some of the reasons why, and she said, he was a homosexual. I'd have known it. And I said, Mom, you just described that you caught him with the man. She said, don't you tell anybody this story about your dad and ruin the grandkids' memories? What's wrong with you?
Wait a minute now.
Yes.
She already wrote it down in her little memoirs, right?
Yeah, but she didn't seem to think that we would think anything of it. And in fact, that my other sisters read it and they didn't say a word about it. They just read it like, well, what's this? But when I read it,
right?
I said,
the guy's got his pants down, and the other guy's looking at, he's giving him an eyeball examination, right?
Right.
It's only this far away from each other.
Well, okay, yes, that is more or less the story of what she saw in the whole. No, they didn't. You don't know. See, this is it. Women do not get this kind of information. They pass it up. They don't let themselves even think about it. Think about it. Why? Why do women like to live in a fantasy even when the truth is right there in front of them?
I think most
somehow
women
that's
don't
not
like the guys they're married to.
How can you want to live in a fantasy that is not even true? I mean, here my mother was desperately unhappy with my dad, but she couldn't figure out why. Well, wouldn't it have been better years ago if society had a better attitude toward, yes, there is homosexuality in this world, and there's a lot of who may be born that way, so why do we persecute? Why do we make it such a bad thing that our fathers can't possibly be this, even if our sons, I mean, nobody can tell us because it's such a horrible, horrible, bad thing. You know, that is not right about homosexuality. It is persecuting the homosexuals, for one thing, which I do not believe in. I thought my dad was trying to kill himself for years. He was trying to he thought he was a terrible, horrible man that everybody would hate when they knew the truth, which they would have done if he tried to foist the truth on him. No, he had to tell him he was something else to satisfy their fantasy. Women, fantasy is not brave of women to have to live in a fantasy rather than embrace the truth, accept the truth, love the truth.
Okay, your time is up. I'm going to make one more comment, which I've made time and time again. You come from a very strange part of the country. Very strange. You know, the one state in the Union that has not accepted being in the Union because they think the other 49 are nuts. That's why they keep going around knocking on people's doors and telling them, we got the way to go.
Well, yes.
No, anyway,
you have a
not
choice.
seriously. I'm not going to